Welcome to Coach Fireside Chat, the podcast where we strip away the glamour and get straight to the heart of coaching. No scripts, no filters, just honest, raw conversations with coaches who are out there making a real impact. I'm Karl Sandland, your host and growth strategist for coaches. I work with coaches to help them build, scale, and create lasting impact in the industry. And in this podcast, I sit down with experienced coaches to deep dive into their journey, their struggles, their breakthroughs, and their unfiltered take on what it really means to be a coach. Whether you're an aspiring coach looking to grow your practice, or you're searching for the right coach to support your personal or professional transformation, this podcast is for you. No fluff, no sales pitches, just real talk about the coaching world from those who are doing the work and changing lives. So grab a seat by the fire and let's get into it. Welcome back to Coach Fireside Chat, the podcast where coaches drop the BS, share the real stories, and talk about the messy, meaningful work that they're doing to help people grow. I'm your host, Karl Sandland, tech strategist and no-fluff systems guy. And today we're going to be diving into the topic that's rarely spoken about honestly in the coaching world, childlessness. My guest today is Jolanda van Bergen, a certified coach and the founder of Thriving Without Kids, a space created specifically for childless women who are ready to move from grief to growth. Jolanda's own journey took her from imagining a life with children to building a fulfilling life without them. And she now helps women facing the emotional pain and identity crisis of unexpected childness to reclaim their purpose, power, and joy without apology. In this conversation, we're going to get into the emotional and social realities of being childless in a world that often doesn't get it, the concept of social infertility, and how it's shaping women's lives, and how to redefine identity, meaning, and wholeness when your story doesn't go the way you thought it would. If you're a coach working with women or somebody navigating this experience yourself, this one is for you. So let's get into it. Welcome, Jolanda.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's fantastic to have you here, and we're going to jump straight in. If you could share the moment that you realized that motherhood wasn't going to be part of your journey.
Oh, you're really diving right in there.
Straight
It's
in.
actually, because it is actually a very interesting point and very different for the different women out there who suffer childlessness. Because the reason is our journey is different. So when it comes to social infertility, there's generally not this one point in time where you're like, oh, damn, I'm not going to be a mother. Whilst with medical infertility, there is usually a point in time. Right? Either a doctor who tells you what your chances are, or there are no chances, or you're exhausted from the treatments and you're like, and you just decide you cannot continue that way and you accept that you have to go down a way without children. So in my case, I remember the day I realized I will not be a mother and I was so crushed. It was a very slow build-up of events in my life that kind of, in the end, led me to that conclusion where I was like, now it's no longer possible for me. This is not going to happen. And
so just for clarity then, for the listeners. So when we're talking about medical infertility, we're talking about some form of diagnosis with fertility problems, or somebody, for whatever reason, has been told, look, medically, you're unable or very unlikely to have children, right? Whereas the social side of things is situations, and we'll go into it in a lot more detail in a minute, but it's situations, not necessarily medical improbability, right?
Exactly. So for me, it was really on the social infertility, which we'll explain a bit more in detail. And it's a combination of circumstances that in the end led me to the conclusion that motherhood is not going to be on my journey. My journey is going to be something different. And I would say the circumstances involves, in my case, mainly relationship. So it was due to the way the relationships evolved that I had to come to the conclusion that motherhood is not going to be for me. And for many others, it's different. It could be economic situations. There could be, nowadays, if you look in the actual world, it can be regulatory reasons, right? As well. Like 2 years ago, I would not even dream about it, but here we are. So yeah, for me, it was really a build-up of circumstances that led me to that realization.
And I suppose even though the outcome is the same, the journey that gets you there is slightly different. As you'd mentioned there, there's almost the slow build up, but then there is that moment in time, there's the realization. But I guess the grief is going to be different then as well, isn't it? There's still going to be a point at which you realize it's not for me, and there's going to be feelings of loss, feelings of not meeting expectations, whether that's societal or parental or partner expectations, your own expectations. So talk to me a little bit about when you had that realization. What was it that you actually felt at that point of coming to that conclusion of having kids just isn't on the cards for me?
The point actually is that in that moment, in my experience, the moment of realizing that it all fell apart, my life, because that's how it felt, it wasn't directly linked to the conclusion of like, oh, but now I'm not going to be a mother. That is part of it, but there's so much going on that it kind of becomes as not an afterthought, because that would not do it justice, but it's not the first thing that comes to mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so there was so much going on that actually it wasn't the thing that was forefront in your mind. However, it was one of the things that was catalogued along with the circumstances.
Exactly, it was part of the conclusion. Like, okay, so now if I have to make a conclusion, it was part of many things, right? It was part of a bigger pool of conclusions. At that time was the feeling of not being good enough. Like I failed at everything. I was like, I'm nearly 40. Like, no one ever wants to get married to me. No one wants to have kids with me. Like, I'm a complete failure. Like, my whole value was tied to I need to achieve this, because otherwise I did something wrong in life. Like, I made the wrong decisions, and here I am, all alone, without kids, without a family, without anything. So it was really the feeling of complete unworthiness. And the constant repetition of asking yourself, like, what did I do wrong? Why is this? At some point, you also start to look back and, like, what if I did this? It's a complete emotional roller coaster of having constant questions on repeat. And sometimes it's the same questions. A lot of time it was the same question, constantly on repeat. And it could be very small things. Like, I lost complete faith in myself. So even if there would be a small thing at work that I would have done, I needed this validation. I needed someone to say, that's all right, that looks okay. Anything. Like, if there was nothing, that would freak me out. That would result in me having the whole night to think, why didn't he say this? If he didn't say anything, then maybe I did it wrong. And on constant repeat, day in, day out. It's total exhaustion when you go through that.
So it affected your self-worth, your self-belief. And it's a very tough one, but it must have been really hard to have been hardwired to be in such a state that you're seeking validation for everything due to the circumstances that you were in. I mean, that's hard, right? I mean, that must chip away somewhat at your identity, as in thinking, well, who am I?
I was completely lost. Like, and it slowly went worse and worse. So what triggered it is the end of a long relationship, the relationship that I thought would result in having children. So when that fell apart, I thought I gave it my all and it's not good enough. So there's point one where I think I'm not good enough. Like at work, then the satisfaction wasn't there, I was seeking validation that wasn't there. And you spiral down. And in the end, you get completely exhausted. And in the end, when I was completely exhausted, I stopped everything. So I even stopped my job. I was like, I need to stop from all this. Like, I cannot continue like this. This doesn't work for me. So I really reached that bottom where I had no energy left to even wonder anymore if I'm good enough.
So, Jolanda, obviously you are in a situation now where your identity isn't in question, the grief isn't there, you've transitioned and you've moved that more into purpose now, and that's what you help women with now. So talk to me about how you've processed that then. How have you put that to one side? How have you reframed and remapped how you feel to accept your identity now rather than be fighting against it and think that there's something wrong with you?
Well, funny enough, when you're, at least I know it happened in my life a few times, when you're in a situation that is completely unknown to you, like in that moment when I was so lost that I've worked so hard to get somewhere, and that all fell apart and I was completely lost. You have these strangers that come into your life and point you in certain directions, like these people that dip in and out of your life. And someone pointed me towards the book of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And it was my very first introduction of actually starting to understand what it means when you have all these thoughts inside your head, what it's anything. I mean, I never thought about personal development, understanding why you feel what you feel, why you think what you think. I never considered thinking about it. So I was introduced to that in one of the first pages. It was written about like what true wealth is, that it's the radiant joy of being and that you have that deep, unshakable peace. And about if you don't have that, then generally you're just out there seeking validation, love, and security. And I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Like, I'm the one seeking validation. Like, it really hit me. But I think when you start, everyone has that book that just blows you away. Like, wow, never
that
like
light
that.
bulb moment. Oh my God, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This explains it, right?
And The Power of Now was that book for me. And I was really like, that's exactly what I'm doing. I was clinging to have that bit of love, security, like a madman seeking for validation on everything I do, with every breath I take. Oh my God, I'm not on the right path. Like, I need to look into this. And that's how it started. That's how I started to seek help, to understand what was happening to me. Why am I feeling? What am I thinking? Where am I going? Who am I? Like, I had to let go of everything that I thought about society, about myself. In order to find a way forward, I had to let go of a ton of stuff. Like, nothing worked for me anymore. And that's why I was in the place where I was. And I had to learn to let go of all that. And then start asking yourself the more powerful questions, like, then who am I? What do I value? And how does that work? How can I bring that in this world? Where do I find it in this world, right? So that's really how I started to transition. And the grief actually came much later. So with social infertility, there's no miscarriage. There's no, you've tried it and maybe there was some hope. There's no physical loss in that sense. There's just an identity loss, an emotion loss. It's imagined almost, if you want, although it's very real. The grief of not being a mother, that hit me much later down the line. When I really thought, when I look back on it, and that's really, I would say, maybe almost in the middle of my journey, if you would have to put a timeline to it, where I also saw a documentary about grieving. Because, the funny thing with grieving is that if we lose someone in our life, we have this whole ritual, right? People give you a hug, maybe you get flowers, there's a funeral, there's a whole ritual that you go through, and that ritual gives a lot of comfort, right? Because it guides you to move on. It guides you towards acceptance, and that, okay, this is really properly closed, and sure, you still feel the pain and you still miss the person, but you have a point where you can move on. And you don't have that when your child was not by choice because of social infertility.
There's that point of closure, isn't it? And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? With bereavement, there is closure, and it's normally when people have had the funeral, the wake, and they've celebrated and said the final goodbyes. There's that point of closure that people then start to repair from. But yeah, with social infertility, it's different because there's not that point, is there? There's not that particular point in time of closure of this has now happened and now I can start to get over it, right?
Exactly. So there's not the instant realization of loss, because it takes work upon yourself to fully understand what has happened to you in your life. Like, how did I end up where I ended up? How did I end up feeling so lost, feeling like that? Like, all the elements that are involved, you don't see them all at once. They come as you do the work for yourself. So for me, the realization of really that loss, that I would never hold my own baby or that I would never have to name it, that came a bit later down the line. But it hit really hard. And I remember that when I was still in the relationship, I used to say, I will have a daughter and I name her Julia. And then I found somewhere online to write letters, which is a very powerful exercise, actually. So I really started to write letters to the daughter I never had, and to write how I feel, how I think it would have looked like. And that way you make it physical. That way you give it a body, let's say, and you make it more real, to say goodbye to something that's not there. And that for me was extremely powerful.
That is very, very powerful. Having done that and having put that out there, it's more real. It's not virtual. It's something that I can see, touch, read back, feel. I put something into that, and it's something you can then hold on to, right? It brings realism to it.
Yeah, it brings realism to it, and it also brings progress. Because for me, a way, at least writing is one of these ways. For others, it's maybe a drawing, or right, everyone has their own method of processing and progressing. But for me, writing helps. So the same in that period when I was lost and I had these constant thoughts, I would write them down, the same sentence, a whole page long, just until it got out of my head. And the same with the letters. The moment I start to write down these letters, I also progress. It's like then you open up space in your mind to allow new thoughts in, because now you have closure of the first thoughts that were always there in your head, and you can move on to the next phase, and then you write about that. So it really is a very powerful tool to help you progress and digest the feelings that you have, give them understanding. Because as you write, things will come up that you're like, these were not even on my conscious mind. Like, where does it come from? And that is one of the most powerful tools to get unstuck and to understand what you're feeling.
The intriguing thing is, just going back to the societal side of things, ultimately, there is no rule book for people living their lives, being with somebody, getting married, having children. There is no rule book that suggests that that's what we should do. And yet a lot of us do get conditioned into thinking, meet somebody, get married, have kids. And we were talking on a group coaching call last night where that exact thing came up, right? Where we were talking about expectations of what you should do. You should leave school, get a job, earn lots of money, and then do this and do that. So the reality is that a lot of the time we're feeding ourselves a narrative, telling ourselves a story, right? That this is what we should be doing. And it's almost ironic that we then beat ourselves up when we don't adhere to the story that we're telling ourselves that we should live our lives to. But it doesn't make it any less painful. It's still painful. There's still an element of loss or not meeting expectations or not good enough. And that can be tough. And is that what's led you to then set up that safe space? Because you have a Thriving Without Kids community, right? You have an online community.
Yes. I must say that was driven because one day I just got pissed off about another comment about kids, that I was working with someone and the work had nothing to do with kids, but this person would always talk about his kids and I just needed a quick answer. And in the answer, the first 2 minutes, it was about kids and I had enough. I was like, it's enough with this. Enough with this. Always kids in it. Understand a bit whom you're talking to. Like, read the room, right? Kind of thing. And that really fueled me. Like, you know what? This deserves a space. Like, we need a space where this doesn't happen. And that's really, I mean, I don't know if that's really the right energy to get from that, how to get started, but that really was like that moment where I say, you know what? Enough is enough. This deserves more attention. This deserves a space. And this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to establish. Like that safe space where we can just talk about how we feel, the triggers we have, maybe on a daily basis, where people can just really go in and out and they only need to say half a word because the rest will understand. And you don't have to feel ashamed. You don't have to feel like a fraud, because a lot of women who suffer from social infertility feel like a fraud, really. They feel like, compared to the medical one, my situation is not even real. So there's that element as well. So I'm really encouraging women who feel like that to know that there is that safe space where they can talk about it and that they're not a fraud and it is real.
It must be especially hard when somebody is going through that social infertility element. I mean, there must be triggers around all the time. And because it's chipping away at your own identity as well. So it must be so great to be around others where you don't have to be careful of what's going to be said. You know that certain things aren't going to be said. You're not going to have to start defending your choices as to why you haven't got children, or talking about, oh, what did you do at the weekend? And everybody's talking about what they did with their kids and stuff. It must be great to have that safe space. And just for anybody who's listening, in the show notes, you will find the link to Jolanda's Thriving Without Kids community. I'll make sure that that's in there. So we've spoken about the grief, the loss at some point that then hits, even for the social infertility. But what are the key things that women will get triggered by? And the reason I think it's good to talk about them is because it's okay to be triggered, right?
Oh, yes.
We can't avoid what other people do and say. We can only approach how we deal with that and process that in a different way, which again, I'm assuming
Definitely.
that's something else that you help your clients with. So what are the key things that you found that tend to trigger women who have social infertility?
I really focus a lot on triggers because while we're building ourselves, while we're trying to figure out who we are, where we're going, it doesn't help to get triggered. So even before knowing maybe where we're going or before we have fully accepted our situation, I wholeheartedly believe in stopping the wound from getting bigger, let's say, if that's the right analogy. So if you learn in the very early on, like while working with me or in your journey, how to manage your trigger, because as you say, you cannot control others, but you can control what it does to you. And if you learn that, then it makes it already easier to continue your journey into healing and flourishing in life. So triggers are very important, and unfortunately, they will never stop. At least that's how I see it. I don't believe they will ever stop. There's always this unexpected moment where you see maybe someone with their children, the way they look at each other, and it just hits you. It can be such ordinary daily things. It was not too long ago, I actually caught myself. I like to go to walk in the park here, and I do it a few times a week. But there are usually school kids around when I go during the day. And one time I went on a Sunday, and I kind of did expect that there would be a lot of families, and there was almost no one. And I realized that my shoulders physically were a bit more relaxed than they usually were. Now, I think I'm pretty good at managing my triggers and knowing when a trigger comes and then to take a step back and protect myself from it. But I still noticed that. Like it doesn't stop, right? It's that powerful and you never know when it comes. So I think it's very important to learn to recognize when you're triggered, when a trigger starts, when you have these physical reactions, how to stop them, how to keep your space, and then you can react without all the emotions, without the emotional layer to it. So the triggers in itself, it's so different for everyone. Like I said, I go to that park so many times, I didn't expect it, and there it is that one day. It could be showing pictures of them with their kids. And there could be days that it doesn't trigger you, and there could be days that it does trigger you. And then it's interesting to find out what made that day a day that it triggered you. Like, what happened that day? What did you think that day? Maybe what part of the cycle are you in your month? Like, it can all matter as to why one day you feel like this and the other day you feel like that. And it's all about understanding yourself. Like, when you understand yourself, you become very powerful.
And as a coach, I mean, one of the things that we do is to help people become more present and at one with how they're thinking and feeling, and to be inquisitive and to not just process it on autopilot, is to actually question, well, why did I feel that? What was different about that this time? And so I love the fact that, you've even included in there, yeah, maybe it's to do with the menstrual cycle at that time. Hormones are going to make a difference. There are so many different factors. And I guess to know and to understand and to be able to pattern some of that out is going to help with how to combat some of those triggers, right?
Definitely. It is really powerful, and it's a big part of the coaching, especially in the beginning. Like I said, I believe that if we can dive into that at the very beginning of the healing journey, then you avoid a lot of other emotional triggers. Like if you can stop the bleeding, let's say, right, then you have to work on what you're already suffering from. I mean, I'm saying it a bit black and white, but I kind of hope the analogy gets across. Because what sticks with you, what sticks with everyone, with me, I mean, that's why we're humans. The emotions stick. We remember how we feel, but we forget what the whole situation around it. And that's why it's so important to talk it through. Like, this day you got triggered. Let's dive into it. What were you wearing? What did you eat? What happened that day? What did you do the day before? What were you thinking in that moment? Were you distracted by something else? Like, were there sounds? Were there smells? What, like, completely dissect the situation. And then pick up on the things like, and maybe it's like, okay, but this happened last week as well. So let's dive into that. Let's see if we can find a pattern if these and these circumstances are there, then the chances of you getting triggered are very high. So let's work on that. Right? You really go to the root cause of what is triggering you. So you have to find what is this combination of circumstances that the same event triggers me that doesn't trigger me another day.
And once you've got the understanding of the triggers, the patterns, and this is really intriguing for me, because what a lot of coaches will then do is work on two methods once people understand triggers that are painful, right? They'll either work on avoidance or reframing to try and help them not have as much impact. Childlessness, especially social infertility, it's difficult because you're not going to be able to avoid the triggers, right? You can, okay, so giving your example of going for a walk in the park, there might be certain days where you decide you're not going to walk in the park. You know, going during school hours is probably quite a good plan because there's going to be less children around if that's one of the things that triggers you. But when it comes to working with your clients or what you advise within the community, do you help more with avoidance of triggers or the reframing of, or both, depending on the client?
I really believe in having the power to make that decision. So knowing yourself enough that you can make that decision. Because there might be days, like if we continue in the park example, if I have a day that I'm like, no, I'm not up for it, then I would say, today I won't go because I know I would hurt myself. I cannot handle it today. I'll do something else. Right? But I have the power. Like I know myself well enough to say, today is not the day. Today I cannot do this. And I think it's all about having that choice, being so empowered, knowing yourself so well that you have that power to say, today I can handle it. Doesn't matter. Like I'm strong. I'm feeling strong in my body, in my mind. Give me all the pictures of kids. I'm fine with it today. And other days where you say, absolutely not. So it's having that power to understand, today I can do this. Today I need to stay away and protect myself and stay away from these circumstances. Or again, you still cannot help it if one of your friends then sends a baby picture, but you can then also reply like, don't do that anymore. Like, I'm happy for you, but wait until I ask for it. And I do that. There are days that that for me, that's, for example, one of the hardest things, to have certain friends with kids and seeing the pictures where they just so lovingly look at each other. That's one of the hardest things for me still. Not with everyone, but with certain friends. And I tell them, like, don't send it, because there are days, if it comes on my phone, it will hit me really hard. And my day would be ruined. And I would cry still. Right? So
Wow.
it's all about empowering, knowing yourself, and then feeling also empowered enough to communicate it. Because we also need to learn to communicate. Other people cannot see what we feel and if we have a good day or a bad day. Right? So you need to understand yourself. And the last bit is then the communication, which is also hard, especially when it comes to family and friends who might not understand the situation that we're in. Then to say, today I cannot do this, or I cannot accept this, or please, going forward, we need to go about it like this. That's hard.
So what advice would you give the general public, other coaches, other people, other friends, about what things to avoid saying and avoid assuming when it comes to, I guess, talking to any woman, really, just in case it happens to be somebody who has social infertility?
I'd be curious and open and ask permission. Don't assume you can talk about the subject, but you can ask permission in terms of coaching relationships. I mean, okay, I'm very much focused, so it's always about that. But if let's say you coach someone on something completely different, but the person is childless, then you have that conversation in advance. Like, you get to know your client and you realize very fast if someone has children or not, because when they have children, they talk about it within a nanosecond. So if someone doesn't talk about it, you can either make the assumption or you can have that open conversation. But ask permission to have that conversation. Maybe that person is not up for it and say, no, don't ever mention it again. This is not our scope. So I would say be open, be curious, and ask permission to talk about it.
It's great advice, but it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because so many people just assume that it is okay to talk about children. In fact, I quite often talk about my children, certainly my youngest daughter. But again, going back a few years ago, when it took like nearly 9 years to bring her into the world, I guess I felt a little bit of that grief, that anxiety of why isn't it happening for us? So yeah, I didn't want to see baby photos. I didn't want to hear about family members, friends who were having children, and it's like you're almost trying to be happy for them, but in the back of your mind, you're jealous as well, and then you beat yourself up because you feel jealous, because you shouldn't be feeling jealous. You should be feeling happy. I guess that brings me to a really important point. There's so many things in life that people struggle with, so many things, and social infertility, it's something until you and I had met, I hadn't really even sort of considered that it had that label, and this is what it meant. I'd always associated infertility with medical infertility, and I think that's why it's so interesting and important, the work that you do, because there will be so many other women who are going through social infertility, who are feeling like you explained near the start of the conversation, where it's almost like I'm not worthy of complaining, really, because there's not a medical reason why.
Even in infertility groups where women should be free to talk, but in that space, a bit of like a pecking order, like, okay, these are the serious cases, and the social infertility is like, yeah, they're just faking it. It doesn't work like that. Your story is very real. Your pain, your grief, it's all very real. It exists. And what you just commented on, that you never heard of social infertility, and this is a very important point, I think. Social infertility was added to the definition of infertility like 5-7 years ago, maybe. So before that,
Wow.
the official term infertility is purely focused on heterosexual couples who are not able to successfully get pregnant within 12 months. Then afterwards, you're labeled as infertility. But that matters, because if the definition is like that, then the policies and the insurances and everything is only focused, and treatment is only focused on that definition. And anyone who does not fall within that definition is excluded. It's excluded from policies, it's excluded from treatments, it's excluded from researches. Like the focus was always on what the definition was. So it's like a milestone that a few years ago, I think it's 5 or 7 years ago, that they broadened the definition to include social infertility.
God, that's shocking. 10 years ago, for example, in effect, everybody who had social infertility was under the radar. That was it. Well, thank goodness for Thriving Without Kids, the community, bringing people together to have that safe space, right? It's such important work that you do, and such an intriguing topic, because again, it's something I hadn't really considered or thought of in the past. Therefore, will be so many other people who are out there that don't consider social infertility as a definition of infertility. And therefore, there's going to be so many people that are struggling with it, struggling with how to process it, how to feel, how to speak up to people that I don't want to see this. I don't want to talk about your kids at the weekend. Sorry. Hat off to you. It's fantastic work that you're doing.
The important thing about Thriving Without Kids, it's the recognition of what you're feeling. It's making it real. And then the recognition and understanding that it's really there gives you the step towards healing. Then to understand, okay, now I know where I stand. Now I know what the problem is. And now I can also create a path forward that serves me. Because life is not just coping. It's not just keeping your head low because no one understands what you're going through and you didn't understand what you're going through. But you don't just have to cope and submit to other people's life choices. You can create your own life, and the life that suits you, that gives you fulfillment, that gives you joy. It doesn't have to be just coping, but it starts by recognizing, feeling that recognition and understanding of what it is that you are feeling and thinking.
What a powerful statement to end with. Jolanda, thank you so much for coming onto this episode. Really intriguing topic, and I don't mean that in any sort of patronizing, condescending way. I love it when I have guests on who can educate me in something that I either wasn't aware of, or something that I think that a lot of people aren't aware of. And I think certainly with the topic of social infertility, I think it's something that probably doesn't have anywhere near the amount of awareness it should. And for you to be able to offer that olive branch to women who are going through that, to hear that there is somebody who can help, there is somebody who does provide a safe space for that, I think that's really powerful. And for all the listeners, I will make sure that all of Jolanda's social links, the links to her website, her community, are available so that anybody who's interested can go and take a look. Again, thank you, Jolanda, for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Karl.
That's it for this episode of Coach Fireside Chat. If you found value in today's episode, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an insight-packed conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more real talk on coaching. And don't stop there. Check out other fantastic episodes where I sit down with more incredible coaches who are out there making a real impact. Thanks for tuning in.